Welcome back, brewers. In this video, we are going to be brewing the perfect beer for this time of year because spring is well and truly in the air. Now, the beer style I'm referring to is a NZ Pils, a New Zealand Pilsner, and it's one of my favourite beer styles. It brings classic, clean, lager-type characteristics combined with those wonderful, wonderful, unique flavours that you experience with New Zealand hops. For me, the NZ Pils really is the perfect type of beer to be drinking at this time of year. You can enjoy this beer to its full potential, super refreshing, complex enough to be really satisfying and showcasing New Zealand hops to their full potential. Our Brew Day in a Box recipe kits, since we launched them, have been firm favourites with all of you out there, and with such a wide range available, they've been really popular. If you remember, at the beginning of the year, we also brought out 3 seasonal specials, and this is going to be a rotational seasonal change that will reflect actually what we want to be drinking throughout the year. And I'm really pleased to say that as we move into spring, we've got 3 new recipe kits available, one of which is this awesome NZ Pils. But also backing it up, there's a Kolsch and also a Belgian Blonde. They're exactly the sort of beers as a trio that we would love to be drinking throughout the spring months as we edge towards the summer. But the one we're going to be brewing today, as I've already said, is the NZ Pils. So let's get the box open and take a look at what's inside and dive into the recipe in a bit more detail. And I'm planning on brewing this beer today on our Brewzilla Gen 4.1 because actually all of you are really interested in learning more and more about the Kegland range of products. And the Brewzilla really is the starting place for all of that. And I've been brewing lots here at the Malt Miller with the Brewzilla, and I'm really falling in love with it. For me, it's a system that combines the ease of an all-in-one system, but also gives me lots and lots of stuff to play around with, tinker with, and find the settings that work best for me so that I can maximize both the efficiency and the enjoyment of my brew day. So let's take a look at what is in the box for our NZ Pils in this Brew Day in a Box recipe kit. Cut through the lid. Now, pull open the tab. Now, if you've not brewed one of these already, they are fantastic. And not only the ingredients inside, but we're really proud of the box design as well. So we have, first off, our Brew Day log sheet, our tap hanger for our kegerator. Then we've also got our push out beer mats as well that are in there, which is a really nice little touch and just makes the most of the packaging for these boxes. Now, this is when we get onto the good stuff. So we've got our instruction sheet, which gives you full step-by-step instructions on how to brew the recipe, including some estimated water calculations for kind of most all-in-one brewing systems. We've got 2 packets of WHC Einstein yeast that we're going to be using to ferment this. Now, we are on the kind of around about 4.7 to 5% ABV, so using 2 sachets of lager yeast, really important. Then we've got our hops, and in this recipe we've included our 2 favourite New Zealand hops. So we've got Motueka, which is going to be used for both bittering and aroma, and then we've got Nelson Sauvin, which we're going to be using for aroma as well. More on that as we get into the recipe. And then the next thing that I love about these recipe kits is the comprehensive nature of them. So we've got our sachet of Pro Mix, which is our yeast nutrient and kettle fining blend that we're going to add sort of 10 minutes before the end of the boil, and we've got Browsol in there as well as a single dose, so that when we get towards the end of once we've hit the end of fermentation and we're thinking about packaging, we can add that so that we make sure we've got pinbright beer at the end. And then the important thing, our bag of lovely fresh grain that we're going to be using to create our wort. Now, I'll just get the box out of the way. Let's talk a little bit about the malt bill for this beer. So we have got predominantly Pilsner malt, and then we've got a little bit of wheat malt and just a touch of light Munich malt. Now, we want this to be kind of bready and malty and have some real malt characteristics, but not overpowering and not so much that it sways the balance between the hops and the malt. So It's going to be clean and crisp, but just with a touch of bready maltiness in there, and that wheat will aid us with a really nice crisp head as well. Now, if I just refer to our recipe sheet a little bit on the hop utilization and how we're going to be creating that lovely hop aroma that we expect from an NZ Pils. So we're going to be using Motueka, and we're going to be using it for our bittering edition as well as a whirlpool edition. Motueka works really nicely as a bittering hop. The alpha acids aren't ridiculously high, but they're high enough for us to be able to deliver the bitterness we want in the beer, and it adds a really nice rounded bitterness as well to the finished beer. We're going to be going with 15 grams of Motueka at 60 minutes, and then another 15 grams at 5 minutes before the end of the boil, just after we've added our Pro Mix sachet. And then we've got 25 grams of Motueka and 25 grams of Nelson Sauvin going in at 80 degrees on our whirlpool, and we're going to leave that to whirlpool for about 30 minutes before we cool and transfer into our fermenter. Now, this is a 23 litre batch, and we're going to be aiming for a starting gravity of around about 1045 and a finishing gravity of around about 1009. So it is going to be crisp and clean and drinkable, but still with a little bit of malt present and allowing those hops to really shine. Now, there's no dry hop on this. We're not venturing into the world of a dry hops lager. This is a classic kind of NZ Pils recipe where it's all about the aroma. Once we're done with our brew day, we're going to transfer into a Firmzilla, and we're going to ferment with those 2 sachets of Einstein at around about 12 degrees until final gravities hit. That could be anything really between 14 and 20 days. We're not going to be rushing it. We're not going to be pushing ourselves with this. We're going to do it clean and classic and allow time to take its course and the yeast to do its job. Now, from a mash perspective, we're going to be mashing at 65 degrees for 60 minutes. We're then going to do a mash out for 10 minutes at 75 degrees. I've got the Brewzilla all filled up, ready to go. Now, just to touch on water, we're going to be targeting a German Pilsner water profile. As I've said, I want it to be clean and crisp and drinkable. So we need to crack on now, get our water additions done and start doing in. So I've added all of my water additions, which was for this recipe, just some Epsom salts, a little bit of lactic acid and some AMS. We are using Brewfather here to target our desired water profile. We're using our tap water in Swindon. You just focus on what works for you. Now it's on to doing this in, and which is my favourite part of brew day. I've said that a million times before on these videos, but what we've done is we've dialed in our Brewzilla to slightly higher than our target temperature. We're actually at 69 degrees at the moment. Once I add the grain, that's going to drop it down to around about 65 degrees. So let's get doughed in. Got my wonderful bag of grain and my trusty mash paddle. In we go. Now I'm going to do this in a few stages, making sure to get it really well incorporated so that I don't have any dough balls and we can get a super efficient mash. There we go, all doughed in. Couple of key things that we are learning more and more about as we brew more with the Brewzilla. Firstly, using the secondary temperature probe, the Bluetooth one that you connect to the controller and then set as your primary temperature probe is super beneficial. The reason for this is you're then getting a very true reading of what temperature is going on within the mash itself, within the grain. Then when we talk about settings on the Brewzilla controller during the mash, we found that actually if you have the pump set to around 20%, what it's doing is bringing just enough liquor back onto the top of the grain bed that's then flowing through nice and gently without drawing too much out from the bottom and thus potentially running the system dry. Now, the other thing as well, in terms of heating, during the mash, you don't want the heating element at full whack. Even with the PID controller turned on, we've found that you'll struggle to really nail down your mash temperatures. So we've actually got this set to its lowest setting, which I think is, 21%. And we found by having it on a combination of that temperature setting and with the pump just circulating at about 20% as well, that's perfect for us to be able to control our mash temperatures and allow the PID everything it needs to really take control of this mash. All that remains for me to do now is set a 60-minute timer, come back. At that point, I'll then ramp it up to 75 degrees for our mash out. See you in an hour. So we've come to the end of our mash period. I have switched back to the internal temperature probe now on the Brewzilla as we approach boiling stage. But obviously first and foremost, we need to sparge this. So I've turned the pump off, always an important step, and also close the valve just in case. Remove the recirculation arm, get the lid off. take out the temperature probe, and now I can lift up the grain pipe. Now I love this 2-stage grain pipe on the Brewzilla. Just going to sit that there and let it settle through and drain through for a few minutes before I actually start sparging. And then it's just a case of running our sparge water through. We're going to be putting through 13 litres of sparge water on this. That should get us up to our pre-boil volume. I'll do a gravity check as well before we start the boil, just to make sure that I'm on the right path towards my specific gravity at the end of the boil. So our sparge is done. Get rid of our grain basket. And now what I'm going to do is, on the temperature controller, we're going to set our target temperature on the heater to 105 degrees. And the reason for that is that's going to get us up to a nice rolling boil. I'm also going to adjust the heat settings up to 100% so that I'm using the maximum capability of the Brewzilla's heating elements. And then the last thing I'm going to do is, because I'm at 98.5 degrees, I'm actually going to add my first charge of hops now. So that's 15 grams of Motueka. I'm just going to go in, and I'm going to give that a little stir. And the reason I like to add the hops just before we come up to a boil is it just helps break that surface tension, minimises any chances of a boil over. And then once I'm up to a boil, I'm going to set a 45-minute timer. When that goes off, I'll add my Pro Mix, and then I'll start getting ready to add my 5-minute hop addition as well. Now there is one other thing to note on the boil. Once we hit a rolling boil, we don't actually need it at 100% again on the Brewzilla. I like to dial it down to around 80 to 85%, just because it takes some of the kind of aggression out of the boil, because it is a super vigorous boil. And at that very first part, you need to get up to the boil, then you can just maintain the boil, and that way you're not going to risk any boil overs during the boil, which can reoccur. So it's 10 minutes before the boil finishes, and this is an important point. We need to add our sachet of Pro Mix. Now, as I've said, this is yeast nutrient and kettle finings, just to give us the best possible chance of having a really nice clear beer and give our yeast the best opportunity as well. So that goes in. And then the next thing we need to add is our wort chiller. It's important to note, at the end of your brew day, you need to make sure your wort chiller is empty of any cold water or hot water, because when you add it into the kettle, whatever brewing system you're doing, when you add one of these coil kind of wort chillers into your brewing system, into boiling wort, if there's any water inside, it can turn to steam and boil and actually come spurting out, and you don't want to get scalded, especially the height it's at. Now we've got a couple of other things to add into the kettle as well to make sure they're sanitized, that we're going to be using later on. First of all, we've got our whirlpool arm, so we're going to put that in there to sanitize, and then we're going to be using the recirculation arm to transfer out of the Brewzilla at the end of the brew day, so that needs to be sanitized as well. So we're just going to hook that over the edge. Now I've got a couple of minutes, and then it's on to adding my very last charge of Motueka into the boil, which is another 15 grams. The timer's just gone on my phone, so I know that I'm in a position now where I've completed our hour's boil, so I need to turn off the heater. Now the next thing I need to do at this point is actually start thinking a little bit more about sanitizing our accessories. So just to make sure before I start chilling that everything I want to use has been sanitized all the way through, we're going to hook up the recirculation arm. I'm going to turn on the pump, open the valve up, and I'm just going to run some hot wort through the system just to make sure that all the pipes and everything that we're going to be using to transfer are sanitized. I'm going to do that for the recirculation arm and then also the whirlpool arm, which I'll be fitting next. Okay, that's been running now for a minute or two. I can turn off the pump. I'm going to uncouple the recirculation arm. Now I need to make sure that is kept somewhere where it's going to remain sanitary. So for this, I'm actually just going to hang it over the side. Now we're going to hook up the whirlpool arm and do the same with that. Now I'm just going to leave the whirlpool arm running because once it's had a moment or two to just run hot wort through it, I'm going to turn on the cold water supply because we've got our chiller all hooked up now, and bring this down to 80 degrees ready for our whirlpool addition. There we are at 80 degrees now, so I've got my 2 additions of 25 grams each of Nelson Sauvin and Motueka. They're going in. I've got my pump running at 100%. That's just going to be giving those hops a really good infusion. We're going to leave this now for 30 minutes. And in the meantime, I'm going to get my fermenter sanitized. So my timer's gone off. That's the end of our 30-minute whirlpool. Now I'm not going to turn off the pump at this point because I want that whilst we're chilling. So open up my water supply. And this should come down really, really quickly because of a combination of the efficiency of the chiller with the whirlpool. So we're constantly moving work past the coil in there. That's going to bring it down to our correct temperature for us to transfer over into our clean and sanitized FermZilla. So I've had the chiller running now for approximately 30 minutes and we are down to 14 degrees in the kettle, which is absolutely fantastic. So I can shut off my cold water supply, turn off the pump, remove my whirlpool arm, and now I can move on to transferring the work from the Brewzilla over into the FermZilla. And all I'm going to do is simply take the lid off, put that into my little trug of sanitizer, pop the hose into there, hook it back up. And for this, I'm going to use the blue knob on the side of the recirc arm to kind of manage my flow. Turn the pump back on, open that up nice and gently, start transferring my work over into the FermZilla. Okay, so the pump's just starting to draw through some of the trub, so I'm turning off the pump now. You can see I've got a lovely full FermZilla. Just turn that out of the way, ready for cleaning. Now I just need to add our glorious Einstein yeast by WHC, and as I said before, we're adding 2 packets of this to this brew. Now I've also taken a gravity reading and I've actually just gone over my numbers and I'm at 1050, so I'm really pleased with the efficiency that I've got on this brew. Next to go in is my wrapped pill so that I can monitor fermentation throughout. Then my wonderfully sanitized lid can go on. And then last but not least, I need to add our spunding valve. Really important that we add our spunding valve. Goes onto the red cap. And I've opened that right up because I'm not going to be fermenting this under pressure. I could if I wanted to, but I want to be testing out a couple of new things we're trialing here, specifically around temperature control. So I'm going to be fermenting this at lager temperatures, around about 12 degrees until we hit final gravity, raise it for a couple of days to do a diacetyl rest. And then after that, it'll be on to adding browsol, clearing, carbonating and packaging, and we'll be tasting the finished beer in a moment. Robert, I have a treat for you.
Beautiful. That looks lovely.
It does look all right, doesn't it? So this is the NZ Pils that I made a couple of weeks back, well actually nearly a month ago now, which this lot, everybody watching will have seen, but you weren't involved. I'm really looking forward to seeing how you find the beer.
Not only was I not involved, I know nothing about the brewing process or how you did it or anything else, hops involved or anything. All I've had is a uncarbonated sample when it finished fermenting and a carbonated sample that was stuck under my nose pretty much first thing this morning. Yeah. That's it.
Perfectly with coffee, didn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah. Here we go, right? So it spent, like I said, nearly a month in the fermenter, including carbonation, transferred it to a keg. I'm really pleased. It's finished at, I think, 1009.
Awesome.
So it's 5.4%. Yeah, well, I was going to ask you to be really analytical, but clearly you're thirsty.
No, well, you know, it's a really refreshing cold beer, and it's been really warm today. It's been really nice, warm. And that this is exactly what I want. It's definitely got a hop presence, isn't it? It's like really lovely foamy head on there as well. It's like a real nice tight moussey head.
It's really crisp, really clean, which is exactly what I wanted. There is that definite kind of limey pop and a little bit of sort of white wine grapiness to it. That would be down to the Nelson Sauvin hops and the Moto Echo as well.
I was going to say it's like Pilsner type bitterness, but that's what it's supposed to be, James.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. And it's definitely got that bitterness about it. That's really good.
And that was Moto Echo used all the way through the boil as well, so for bittering.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, we don't normally do that, do we? Because we normally use something that's a little bit more economical to get the bitterness levels up, and then throw in the flavour hops and the you know, as at the end of boil, whirlpool and dry hops, but Moto Echo right through.
Yeah. It is a dual purpose hop.
That really shows actually. I think actually Moto Echo was designed as a lager hop originally.
I mean, it's really interesting. There's no dry hop on this. It was all in the whirlpool. Now, if you wanted to play around with the recipe, you could actually, you know, put a bit of Moto Echo and Nelson in as a dry hop. You could move some of the whirlpool addition out and put it into dry hop as well. But, you know, I think it's just, in terms of what I set out for this beer, you know, to be really crisp, really clean, super refreshing, and to really showcase those New Zealand hops in glory. It's a big tick in the box for me.
Yeah, it's a cracker, James. It's dry as well, isn't it? I mean, it's
Yeah.
really got that real dryness to it. It really makes you want to drink more and more.
Yeah, it's a spring beer, right?
Yeah,
That's the whole thing for it.
Cracking. Nice one, James.
Thank you very much. Glad you enjoyed it.
I did.
And if you're watching this at home, you can now pick up this recipe kit along with the other 2 seasonal brew day in a box kits that we've launched, which is a Belgian blonde and a German Kolsch. Links for those are in the description down below. Honestly, grab one of these, get it fermented. You'll be enjoying it. You know, if you buy it now, we're at the end of March, early April. You could be enjoying this come May bank holiday weekend.
Or
right?
possibly a bit earlier because Easter's late this year, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you could always ferment it under pressure. We didn't, but you could. You know, it's a really versatile beer style if you've got that kind of equipment. So yeah. Now, if you've made it to the end of the video and you are not already a subscriber, please do hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell for notifications as well, so you can stay up to date with everything we're doing here at Malt Miller HQ. Oh, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps us out. If you've got any questions at all about brewing a New Zealand Pilsner or anything to do with home brewing at all, drop them down in the comments section below. We will get back to you. Also, you can find us on all the usual social channels, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. But no, I'm not dancing, and neither's Rob yet. And as ever, have a great brew.
Cheers.
Cheers.